A dollar circulates in the average white community in America for roughly 20 days before it leaves. In black neighborhoods across the country, a dollar circulates for about 6 hours. Not 6 days, 6 hours. But the reasons behind that gap have nothing to do with work ethic. They trace back to bank vaults, city zoning maps, and handshake deals inside country club dining rooms that never made the history books. This is 22 of those differences. And number 13 involves an entire black economy that got burned to the ground. Number 1. The bank access gap and the cash economy trap. For generations, a white entrepreneur could walk into a local bank branch with a business plan, a firm handshake, and a house to put up as collateral. That house, bought with a VA loan or inherited from a parent, became a springboard for startup capital. Black entrepreneurs walked into those same bank lobbies and got denied at nearly twice the rate, even with comparable credit scores. The bank loan gap is not a myth. It is the foundation that everything else on this list was built on, and it explains why so many black businesses started with personal savings, borrowed money from family, or bootstrapped from nothing. And when the banks said no, cash became the operating system, not by choice, but by circumstance. When banks will not give you a merchant account, when credit card processing companies consider your zip code high risk, cash is all you have. The problem is that cash-heavy businesses are harder to scale, harder to get loans for, and more vulnerable to theft. White-owned businesses were building credit histories through every swipe of a card, every processed check, every line of credit extended and paid back on time. Two businesses doing the exact same revenue in the same city looked completely different on paper. One had a banking relationship, a credit score, and a paper trail that said trustworthy. The other had a safe in the back room and no way to prove any of it to a lender. Number 2. Owning the building versus renting the storefront. This goes back to redlining maps drawn up by the federal government in the 1930s. Entire black neighborhoods were outlined in red ink on city maps and labeled as hazardous for investment. That meant no mortgages, no business property loans, no opportunity to own the building your business sat inside. White family businesses across America were sitting on deeded commercial property passed down from grandparents. The barber shop, the hardware store, the corner pharmacy. They owned the walls. Black business owners were paying rent to someone else, which meant their profit margins were thinner from the jump, and their wealth never accumulated in the property itself. Number 3. The church as a business headquarters. In black communities across the South and in northern cities like Chicago and Detroit, the Sunday morning church service was the original networking event. Pastors would announce a new business from the pulpit. Congregations would commit to patronizing a member's new restaurant or barbershop before it even opened. White entrepreneurs had a different version of this. They had the Rotary Club, the Chamber of Commerce, the Country Club dining room, same function, completely different address book. But this next difference is the one that changed how entire generations learned to build something from nothing, and it didn't happen in a classroom. Number 4. The barbershop and beauty salon as business schools. A black-owned barbershop in any American city was never just a place to get a haircut. It was a walk-in cash flow machine, a trust-based referral network, and an apprenticeship program all wrapped into one storefront. Young men watched the owner manage clients, handle money, and negotiate rent with the landlord. That was their MBA. On the other side, white family businesses often sent their kids to formal business programs at universities or brought them into established operations with existing infrastructure, accountants, and supplier contracts already in place. Number 5. The apprenticeship pipeline and the union lockout. In many white-owned businesses, especially in trades like plumbing, electrical work, and construction, knowledge got passed down through formal apprenticeship programs and union membership. A father brought his son into the electricians' union, and that son had a career path waiting for him. Training programs, certification systems, job placement networks, all built in. Black tradespeople were often locked out of those unions entirely. Applications got lost, waiting lists stretched for years, and membership votes conveniently went the wrong way. So the knowledge transfer happened differently. You learned by working alongside your uncle, Watching your neighbor fix engines in the driveway, picking up skills informally because the formal doors were closed. The skills were the same. The credential was not. Number 6. Mutual aid societies and lending circles. Before civil rights legislation opened up banking access, black communities across America created their own financial safety nets. Mutual aid societies, penny savings clubs, burial insurance cooperatives. These organizations pooled money so members could cover emergencies, fund funerals, or help a neighbor open a small business. In West African tradition, a practice called a susu involves a group of people contributing a fixed amount to a shared pot each week, with one member collecting the full sum on a rotating basis. Black communities in America adapted this model into lending circles that funded business startups and property purchases. White communities had their own version through fraternal organizations like the Elks Lodge, the Moose Lodge, and the Knights of Columbus. But those groups operated with access to mainstream banks and real estate networks that multiplied their impact. Both systems put money into the hands of entrepreneurs. One operated inside the banking system, and the other operated around it. Now, everything you just heard covers how each group started a business. But the barriers did not stop at the starting line. They got worse once the business was actually running. Number 7. Franchise access and the gatekeeping problem. When the fast food franchise boom exploded across the American highway system in the 1960s and 1970s, the application process was not exactly colorblind. A McDonald's franchise in 1975 required significant capital, a real estate commitment, and approval from corporate leadership that looked at your whole profile before saying yes. White applicants with existing business networks and banking relationships got approved at far higher rates. Black applicants faced extra scrutiny, red-line neighborhoods where franchises would not approve locations, and lending barriers that made the required capital nearly impossible to secure. And franchise ownership mattered, because it was one of the most reliable paths to middle-class wealth in post-war America. You were buying a proven system with built-in customers, but the door to that system had a lock on it, and who held the key depended a lot on what you looked like and where you lived. Number 8. Vendor and supplier relationships. In the wholesale distribution world, a lot of business still gets done on a handshake. A white-owned restaurant owner who grew up in the same neighborhood as his produce supplier got better prices, flexible payment terms, and priority delivery. Black business owners buying the same products from the same distributors often paid closer to retail pricing because they did not have those generational relationships, and that cost difference compounds. Over a year, paying 10 or 15% more for inventory can be the difference between profit and closing the doors. But if vendor pricing was a slow drain, what happened with insurance was a cliff, because without coverage, one bad day could erase everything. Number 9. Insurance discrimination against black storefronts. Getting insurance for a business is supposed to be a straightforward numbers game. Assess the risk, set the premium, issue the policy. For black business owners, especially in urban neighborhoods, insurance companies charged higher premiums, imposed stricter requirements, or flat out denied coverage. A fire, a flood, a break-in could wipe out a business with no safety net. White-owned businesses in suburban shopping centers paid lower premiums and filed claims with far less friction. This difference in risk protection shaped how aggressively each group could afford to grow. If you know one bad month could end you, you do not take risks. You play it safe. And playing it safe is how businesses stay small. Number 10. Advertising without a marketing budget. When you cannot afford a newspaper ad or a spot on local television, you get creative. Black businesses built their customer base through word of mouth at church, announcements in community newsletters, flyers stapled to telephone poles, and shout-outs on local radio stations. White businesses in the same era were running quarter-page ads in the local newspaper, listing in the Yellow Pages phone directory, and sponsoring segments on the evening news broadcast. Both approaches worked, but one scaled faster and reached beyond the neighborhood. This next one is different from everything else on this list, because this was not just a business. It was an entire economy built from the stage up. Number 11. The Chitlin Circuit as a business blueprint. Before black performers could book mainstream concert halls and theaters in America, they built their own touring network. The Chitlin Circuit was a chain of venues across the South and Midwest that booked black musicians, comedians, and performers. Artists like James Brown, B.B. King, and Richard Pryor all came up through these stages. And the venues themselves were black-owned businesses creating an entire entertainment economy from scratch. Promoters, venue managers, hotel operators, and restaurant owners all fed off each other's success. One concert night at a venue in Memphis or Atlanta could keep an entire block of businesses profitable for the week. White performers operated inside the mainstream booking agency system with access to larger venues, bigger budgets, and nationwide advertising in major newspapers. Same industry, parallel universes. But one of those universes was built entirely by the people inside it, with no outside help and no outside permission. Number 12. Hiring from the block. A black-owned business in a neighborhood like Bronzeville in Chicago or Fifth Ward in Houston was often the only employer on the street. Hiring meant employing your neighbor, your cousin, the kid from the church youth group. That created deep community loyalty. But it also meant that business decisions and personal relationships got tangled together in ways that made scaling harder. Firing someone meant seeing them at Thanksgiving dinner. White-owned businesses, especially those operating in commercial districts or industrial parks, had more distance between the owner and the employee, which made restructuring easier but also less personal. And that community loyalty, that deep investment in keeping dollars circulating internally, reached its peak in one place, a place that proved exactly what was possible when black businesses operated as a self-sustaining ecosystem. Number 13. The Buy Black Movement and Black Wall Street. In 1900, Booker T. Washington founded the National Negro Business League to encourage black Americans to support black-owned businesses. That philosophy created pockets of extraordinary wealth. The Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma became known as Black Wall Street, with hundreds of thriving businesses serving a community that kept its dollars circulating internally. Black-owned grocery stores, hotels, movie theaters, law offices, and hospitals lined the streets of Greenwood. The dollar did not just stay for 6 hours in that neighborhood. It stayed for weeks, touching dozens of hands before it left. And then, in 1921, it was destroyed. White mobs burned Greenwood to the ground over 2 days. Over 1,000 homes and businesses reduced to rubble. Decades of accumulated wealth gone. The destruction of Greenwood set the entire Buy Black movement back a generation. White businesses never needed a formal campaign to keep dollars in their community. The entire mainstream economy was already structured to do it automatically. And that pattern, dollars circulating internally until an outside force destroyed it, is the exact framework I break down in the Black Dollar Playbook. It is a free resource, and you can grab it from the link in the description. Whether you are black, white, or anything else, if you want to understand how money actually moves through a community and how to make it work harder for you, that playbook will change how you see it. Now, after Greenwood, the barriers did not go away. They just got harder to see. And the next few differences on this list are the ones that operated in the shadows. Number 14. Professional networks and closed-door deal-making. The country club golf course, the private cigar lounge, the alumni fundraiser at a prestigious university. These were the spaces where white business owners made deals, found investors, and recruited partners. A handshake on the 18th hole at a country club in Westchester could move more money than a month of cold calls. Black entrepreneurs were excluded from those rooms for generations, which meant they had to build parallel networks from scratch. Organizations like the National Black Chamber of Commerce filled that gap, but they operated with fewer resources and less political leverage. The playing field was not just uneven on the field. It was uneven in the hallways, the dining rooms, and the parking lots where the real business happened. Number 15. Legal protection and contract enforcement. Imagine signing a contract and knowing the courthouse will side against you before you even walk through the door. For much of American history, black business owners operated in a legal environment where contracts were harder to enforce, disputes were harder to win, and the legal system itself was an unreliable partner. If a supplier shorted your order or a landlord violated your lease, taking it to court in a segregated courthouse was a gamble you could not afford to lose. The result was a business culture built on handshake agreements and personal trust, because the alternative was a system that did not work for you. White businesses leaned on legal infrastructure as a safety net, using attorneys, contracts, and court filings as tools for growth and protection. One group had the law as a business partner. The other had to work around it. But the systemic disadvantages were not always written into law. Some of them were invisible, built into how customers thought and where city planners drew the lines. Number 16. Pricing strategies and the perception gap. A black-owned clothing boutique on a side street and a white-owned clothing boutique in a downtown shopping plaza could sell the exact same jacket from the exact same wholesaler. The white-owned store could charge a premium because mainstream consumer culture assigned higher perceived value to businesses in certain zip codes, with certain storefronts and certain clientele walking through the glass door. The black-owned boutique in a converted brownstone often had to undercut on price just to compete, which squeezed margins and made reinvestment harder. Less margin means less money for better displays, better signage, better inventory. And that cycle reinforces itself. This perception gap has narrowed with social media and direct-to-consumer branding, but for decades it was a silent tax on black entrepreneurship that nobody put on a balance sheet. Number 17. Business location and the zoning battle. Where you could open a business was never a free choice in America. City zoning laws, redlining maps, and commercial corridor planning dictated where businesses could operate. White business owners had access to high-traffic commercial strips near City Hall, downtown retail space, and shopping centers with built-in foot traffic and paved parking lots. Black business owners were often zoned into residential neighborhoods, forced to operate out of converted homes or in areas with less visibility, fewer customers walking by, and less infrastructure like proper signage and street lighting. A great product in a bad location loses to an average product in a great location almost every time, and who got which location was decided by city planners with red pens, not by the market. Number 18. Record keeping and the accountant gap. Having a professional accountant was a luxury many black small business owners could not afford. Receipts went into shoeboxes under the counter, taxes got filed late or estimated, and the financial history of the business lived in the owner's memory rather than in a proper ledger sitting on a desk. Without clean books, applying for a loan was nearly impossible. Without financial records, proving profitability to a potential buyer or investor was a dead end. White-owned businesses, especially those with banking relationships, often had access to bookkeeping services, professional accountants, and financial advisors who helped them track performance and reduce their tax burden. The difference between a shoebox and a spreadsheet is the difference between surviving and scaling. And for decades, who had access to which one was not a matter of choice. Every single difference so far built on the one before it. Bank access affected property ownership. Property ownership affected insurance. Insurance affected how much risk you could take. And all of it affected whether wealth survived long enough to pass down. Number 19. Generational wealth transfer and business succession. A white family that owned a plumbing company in the 1950s could pass that business down to their children with its customer list, its equipment, its service trucks with the family name painted on the side, and its reputation built over decades in the same town. Those children inherited a running operation with revenue on day one. They did not need to figure out marketing or build trust from scratch because the customers already knew the name on the truck. They called the same number their parents called. In black families, systematic barriers meant that businesses were less likely to survive the founder. Without property ownership, without banking relationships, without legal protections that held up in court, each new generation often had to start from zero at the starting line. The wealth did not compound the way it was supposed to because the foundation kept getting wiped out or was never allowed to exist in the first place. One family passes down a business. The other family passes down the lessons from losing one. Number 20. Side hustle culture before anyone called it that. In black households across America, running multiple income streams was not a trend you read about on social media. It was survival. A man might work a factory job during the day, cut hair in his kitchen on evenings, and fix cars in the garage on weekends. A woman might teach school during the week, do catering on the side for church events, and sell homemade goods at the church bazaar on Sundays. Three businesses out of one house. Nobody called it diversified income. Nobody posted about it online. They just did it because one income stream was never enough to cover what the system was designed to withhold. Number 21. The role of women in building each tradition. In Black business culture, women were not waiting in the back office. Madam C.J. Walker became one of the first female self-made millionaires in America by building a hair care empire marketed to Black women in the early 1900s. Black women have been co-founders, operators, and decision makers in their family businesses from the very beginning, often running the finances while also running the household. In traditional white business culture, women were more often kept in support roles, handling the bookkeeping or managing the home while men ran the storefront. That dynamic has shifted dramatically in recent decades, but the historical difference shaped two very different entrepreneurial legacies. One tradition waited to be invited to the table, the other one built the table. And that brings us to the last difference on this list, and it is the one that changes everything. Number 22. The digital divide and the great equalizer. When the internet arrived in the 1990s, it did not arrive equally. Wealthier, predominantly white suburbs got broadband access first. Businesses in those communities built websites, launched online stores, and reached customers nationally before Black businesses in underserved neighborhoods even had reliable internet connections. But something interesting happened with social media. Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube gave every entrepreneur the same storefront, the same audience, the same algorithm. For the first time in American history, a Black entrepreneur with a cell phone and a good product could reach the same customer as a corporation with $1 million marketing budget. The playing field is not perfectly level yet, but it is closer than it has ever been. Every single difference on this list, from the bank loan gap to the zoning maps to the vendor handshakes, existed because the systems were built to favor one group over another. Understanding those differences is not about blame. It is about seeing the full picture so you can play the game with your eyes open, regardless of what you look like. And the entrepreneurs who figured out how to win with every disadvantage stacked against them, who created entire economies out of barbershops, churches, and lending circles, those are the ones with the real playbook. That playbook works for everybody. If you want to go deeper on this, I am breaking down the exact wealth building strategies that came out of these systems in the next video. Subscribe so you do not miss it. Click the video on screen right now.